Hello everybody, Floppy Waffles 69 here, and today we will be featuring the latest Dockyard ship, finally, because I finally got my hands on her. The latest Dockyard ship, the Roussillon, I believe is how you say it. If you don't say it that way, who really gives a fuck? It doesn't matter, you know what ship I'm talking about, and for the remainder of the video, we're just going to call her the Rose. Okay, the Rose, whatever. This is the latest Dockyard iteration to the game. She is still obtainable, but I believe the time that you guys will be watching this video, I think you have about like 12 or 11 days left to complete the Dockyard via missions to obtain her. Now, obviously, if you spent the initial doubloons before the first 4 phases were complete, when the Dockyard went live last update, you should theoretically already have her by now. So this really isn't going to be pertaining towards you. This is going to be more pertaining towards players such as like myself, who are just doing and grinding the Dockyard missions to get her at the most discounted price possible, which I believe the lowest price you can obtain this ship for is 6,000 doubloons, because you need to complete the last 2 phases with dubs, which are going to run you about 3,000 doubloons each. Now, 6,000 doubloons for a tier 9 premium battleship with improved income is a absolute steal. But at the end of the day, you're probably sitting there asking yourself, is this ship worth it? Now, if you've tuned in to other, obviously more popular YouTubers, community contributors, streamers, whatever it is, the big general consensus around the community as of right now is that the Roussillon or the Rose here just really isn't worth it. They say the ship is incredibly inconsistent, it is incredibly squishy, there are just better ships to play at tier 9. And my response to this, after meticulously thinking about that, was no shit. If you sit there and you compare this ship to all the broken ships at tier 9, mainly looking at Valparaiso is the big one that stands out to me. Of course this ship's not going to be worth it, guys. And I think that's what we are doing as a community, and especially with the battleship population of this game, is I think people are comparing it immediately to the best of the best, and that is supposed to be the standard of this game, okay? Instead, what we should be doing and recognizing as the community is that the Valparaiso needs an immediate nerf because she's beyond broken and ruining the meta. And again, she's not alone. That's just the one big ship that stands out, to me at tier 9 especially, because we're comparing it to here the Ruse at tier 9. And they're both battleships. Instead of nerfing that ship or continuously calling for a nerf, instead we're sitting there saying this ship is shit. You should be playing the Valparaiso because it's broken and more fun. I, for one, am under the understanding that I think the player base just doesn't know what they're asking for. We've seen this time and time again, and when you have these really popular streamers that all they do is play these things, but they're going to sit there and bash on them, like, of course they're going to say this ship is shit, because they're going to arguably get better results in a more high-octane vessel that's played in the front lines, that's near and nigh unkillable, unless everybody focuses the damn thing, right? So it's one of those things you have to keep in mind when you're hearing a lot of these players say, oh, this ship is shit, blah, blah, and X, Y, and Z. You have to understand where they're coming from. Now, as someone coming at this with only two things of bias, and I want to make that crystal clear before I actually start the meat and potatoes of this review, okay? The first thing of bias is that I am a cruiser main, okay? I love cruisers. I think they're the most fun playstyle cruise, ship class in the game, and I play them not exclusively, but more often than not, I'm playing cruisers. Out of every 3 battles, I'm probably playing cruisers 2 out of those 3 battles, okay? I want to make that clear, okay? My second bias, though, is that my favorite battleship in the game is the Republique for the French. So is there a little bit of French love in me? Maybe enticing this video or encouraging me to say better things about the Ruse? Maybe. But I'm going to let you, come to that conclusion for yourself, because I really don't think I did that this video. Okay, but I want to make that clear so that you kind of go into it knowing that, oh, well, Waffle's favorite battleship is the Republic. He must love the French battleship play style, and therefore, of course, he's going to like this ship, right? So again, if you believe that, if you see that, that's fine too. But I wanted to make that apparent to you guys so that you kind of know that there is something of potential bias coming into it. Because let's be honest, guys, everyone has bias. Even though they're going to sit there and say, oh, no bias, no bias. Everyone behind closed doors has a little bit of bias with their opinions, okay? And I just want to make that crystal clear to you guys, as this is the channel of no bullshit. This is the channel of where we try to be crystal clear with everything, even though we're not the best at it, but we try to, and paint things in a really, black and white, in your face kind of style, to get the message across, okay? So I want to make that crystal clear, okay? So moving on. Now, as you can see, this is a little bit different of a review, right? This isn't like your typical analysis. I usually start in the port screen, I go over the stats and all that kind of stuff, and then I go ahead and follow up with like a game or two, talking about the pros, the cons, the ship, and then giving my final thoughts. Yeah, it's a little bit different. I have about 3 battles here that are going to be playing in the background. Really not going to be touching too much on the battles. Maybe here and there I'll touch base on the battles you're seeing in the background, but they're more or less just supposed to be featuring the ship to show you, on average, what you're probably going to be getting as a result out of this thing, okay? All the games I had, they weren't bad, okay? But they're nothing phenomenal. These aren't your 250 to 300,000 damage games. Battleship main, this ship, is phenomenal. You need to go out and get this ship. That's not the premise of this video. If you're watching this video, you want the actual truth. What does the normal player, what are they going to get out of the ship? Is it worth my time? Is it worth my money to go after this ship and pick her up? Okay. If I've recommended ships in the past to you guys that you don't find fun, if you don't find good, I apologize for that. It's one of those things that, you can't get it right 100% of the time, and I'm sorry. But the best thing I can do is try to compare the ship you're seeing on the screen that I'm trying to give a review on to other ships in the game that you may or may not have, but have definitely fought against. And if that helps, potentially paint a clearer image for you, that's the goal here, okay? So the Rousse, what is she basically? So we're actually going to start the review now after this long diatribe of talking about this ship. So what is the Rousse, okay? To sum up what this ship is, basically drop down to tier 8, we have the Champagne, which is a pretty popular, not a popular ship, but a pretty commonly known ship at this point. You don't see her played a whole lot, and there's reasons to that, but she has been in the game now for quite some time. She has actually received a change here in the last year, which I think set more of a foundation to what you see on your screen now with the Rousse. Okay, so the Champagne down at tier 8, up tiered to tier 9, we pick up the Alsace hull, and we pick up an additional number 3 turret from the Champagne and plop her down on this ship. And then you have a Rousse. The Champagne down at tier 8 attempts to be a very, very stealthy sniper backline ship that can absolutely punish broadsides and is the bane to enemy cruisers. And it can be a bane towards battleships as well, but it really wants to take full advantage of broadsides. But in return, you have a platform that isn't the most durable and a little bit more fragile, okay? I don't want to sit here and say the Rousse and the Champagne are Citadel proof, because they're not. But more often than not, you will not be scoring Citadels on these ships based upon the armor scheme of the 2 ships, okay? A lot of spaced armor. Citadel is hidden, very narrow, underwater, right? Well, not really underwater, but slightly above water, mostly waterline, and they do have some turtlebacks, right? Typical French turtlebacks, which is if you get in close and show flat broadside, the enemy probably will Citadel you if it has large caliber guns with high penetration. At longer ranges, you most likely won't be eating those just because of your armor scheme, okay? That's at least what I find, playing these ships and playing against these ships, okay? These ships have a big weakness, like typical French battleships and Royal Navy battleships in this game. They are coated in 32 millimeters of armor. And what does that mean? That means HE from light cruisers, mainly heavy cruisers, and or IFHE will absolutely melt these ships. You saw on the screen here about 2-3 minutes ago, I was full HP, but the second I was focused by the Burgon, the Bremen, the Kushiro, and another ship, I think it was like the Alaska, my HP pool went to half. That will happen if you do not position correctly in these ships. That is why I will flat out tell you, if you're asking the question about these ships, can I brawl with these ships? First of all, there really is no French battleship in this game I would be speccing secondaries in because you simply don't have the durability in the armor to maintain consistent amounts of damage and mitigate it, okay? You really don't. So even with this thing's secondary DPM and what it has for secondaries, which again, you have decent amount of secondaries that have an 8-kilometer range, just like the Alsace, I really wouldn't be speccing into our secondaries, okay? What you should be speccing into are the main battery guns, your consumable cooldown time, so you can catch broadsides like this, and pretty much half an enemy cruiser, if not nuke them at the beginning of the battle right off the get-go, okay? That is what this ship does, is an opportunist ship, and it takes full advantage of the main battery reload booster that comes along with her. So basically you get one salvo, and then half the amount of time you get another salvo. Obviously that's shit luck. We get 4 overpens. It happens, guys. That's what balances this ship, right? It's what should balance all battleships, is the inconsistency of the main battery. We've kind of gotten away from that, and I think that's what people set their standards as now with battleships, and I don't think that's a healthy recipe, because if you completely eliminate a massive, balancing feature of a ship class, everyone's going to play that ship class. You also give this ship class, for example, 11-kilometer ASW technically has the best ASW. Like, you give the most survivability, as they should have. People are going to play it more because it's a little bit easier. So all these things, and that's why you see, 30, 40, 50 battleships in queue all the time, maybe 10 cruisers and, 20 destroyers, and, you get my point. They're popular because they're a little bit easier. That's all I'm trying to say. Okay? So we've kind of gotten away from that. And again, if you disagree with me, that's fine. Hey, we're all here to have a conversation, a healthy conversation, and we're here to debate, At the end of the day, that's what the comment section's for. I'm not here to say I'm right, you're wrong. It's not that. I just state my opinions. You state yours. Hopefully we find some common ground. I really try to avoid people that are a little bit more aggressive, that say, you don't know what you're talking about. You're clearly biased towards X, Y, and Z, and I think you're an idiot. I don't think it's really healthy at that point. I think everyone has a right to an opinion. And I think we also have the right to hear the opinion, and we also have the right to give back that opinion, a rebuttal towards that opinion, I think, right? That's kind of my main premise here. So looking over, we already touched on the armor scheme. So now we're going to touch on the main battery. Okay, this is the 3x3 406mm guns. And a lot of people don't know that the Champagne actually gets 406mm guns, which means it can go ahead and overmatch 28mm of armor. So a lot of your more heavily armored cruisers that get the 27mm bow, well, the Rousse and the Champagne can go ahead and overmatch that right through the nose. I think a lot of people write it off right away because the only battleship for the French Navy that gets big guns, they think, oh, the Republic with its 431mm guns, I believe. So they know, and they're scared of that to an extent. But I think that the Rousse and the Champagne kind of catches people off guard with the 406mm guns. They are bigger guns. I mean, the rest of the line gets 380mm guns, right? I think that starts at tier 8 with the Richelieu. So, and especially what this ship looks like and is a sister ship of, which is the Alsace, that also gets 380mm guns, but they get the quad turrets, not the triple turrets. So again, kind of like balancing feature there with the turrets and the guns and all that stuff. So obviously with the 406s, that's going to give you a little bit higher alpha at 12,100, where the Alsace only gets 11,900, I believe, with its AP values. But again, because you have the 406mm guns, and these are Champagne guns, you're going to have higher weighted shells. You're going to have higher initial speed, lower drag coefficient, faster flight time, higher impact speed. Your Krupp, which is the weight of the shell as well, is going to be higher at 2,900. Your penetration is going to be way higher. And then again, the fuse time again matches the Alsace. So what's this all translating to? Your shells are going to reach the target faster, and they're going to be doing, usually on average, more damage. That's why I would consider this thing more of a sniper, and takes full advantage of sniping cruisers and battleships at medium to longer ranges. I mean, the main battery firing range on this ship does clock in at a whopping, what is it, 23 kilometers. And I believe the Champagne gets a 25 kilometers. Again, just because you have that range doesn't mean we need to be playing at those said numbers of the main battery range, okay? It just allows you a little bit, flexibility and a little bit more map control like the Republic does, so you can make those cross-map claps and hit strategic targets maybe that are unaware that you can hit them, okay? That's what allows you to do. And that's why I take the spotter plane on the vessel here. As you can see, my consumable loadout at the bottom. You get your damage control party, you get your repair party, you do get the speed boost, which I believe is the 8% speed boost on the ship. You get the main battery reload booster, which we'll talk a little bit more about here later. And we have the choice between a spotting aircraft and the fighter. Now, I know this is the update with the patrol fighter actually being a little bit more viable. To me, though, especially on battleships, I want that kind of aerial coverage where I can press the C key and I can see the top down a little bit on the ship. It allows me to kind of see if I can hit ships hiding, maybe cruisers hiding behind islands, and maybe I can take advantage of that and potentially get a lucky, shot on them. I think ships that are notorious for doing that are ships that have floatier shells. Like the Montana is a great ship at shooting over those islands and absolutely dumpstering those, island huggers just because of the way the Krupp is and the impact angle of those shells coming in and hitting the ship behind the island. So that's kind of why I do still prefer the spotting aircraft on this ship, and I'm going to fully recommend the spotting aircraft on this ship. One thing about the Roussillon-I, because she is a sniper and she has the main battery reload booster to compensate for this flaw, she does have a little bit of a longer reload than her tech tree counterparts. Okay, so the reload of the Rus base is 36. I believe with the main battery reload, main battery reload mod 3 in the 6th slot, you can get it down to 32 seconds. And again, with Adrenaline Rush, you can go ahead and get that down even further, which is again what I recommend taking on this ship. With that being said, the Champagne down at tier 8 actually gets a quicker reload. Because it only has 6 guns, I'm assuming that's what Wargaming was thinking. That actually picks up a 28-second reload. And then obviously the Alsace there coming in at standard 30-second reload, which again, it used to be 32. But I'm assuming because they knew they were going to release the Rus, they ended up buffing it down to 30. So the Rus does have a little bit of a longer reload that it has to kind of compensate with. But again, it has the main battery reload booster. So is it really that big of a flaw? Not really. It just means it's a little bit more reliant on using that. And that is one thing I want to touch base on too, is make sure we're not too conservative with our main battery reload boosters. Make sure we're using those when targets such as you see here, the Libertad, which is going to go flat broadside to me. I have incredibly good penetration at this, at this range on that ship, and that ship is notorious for not getting citadeled when it's flat broadside. We can go ahead and take full advantage of him and get him down lower so that our team can hopefully take advantage. And we ended up dropping him down to 5 or 4K there with an 18,000 damaging volley. Sadly, we don't land any citadels, but hey, we end up taking him down still, which was the main goal. Now, obviously, you see here, I'm really in a tough spot. I already knew that the Conqueror was going to be sitting at the back of the map, but because he's HE spamming in the back of the map, that doesn't really translate to winning games, right? It was what we want to do. So as long as we're able to eliminate, more strategic targets like the Libertad, hopefully the Shimakaze shows his face, I'm okay with kind of dying to this guy if I can go ahead and out-trade a lot of other ships to do as much damage as possible to the enemy ships. I know they had a Thunder over here too, which was absolute cancer. Thank God we were able to eliminate at least one of them. I think me and the Slava were able to do that. So, again, you kind of see what I'm saying. Just because you're HE spamming and doing a shit ton of damage, that doesn't really translate to winning games, right? You still have to be strategic with your ship and shooting strategic targets and that sort of stuff. Obviously, the Shimakaze does end up showing his face, so we're able to schwack him for a little bit. And we end up taking him down to like 3,000 damage before we end up going down here, which again was kind of the goal here. I wanted to make sure that I live as long as possible and do as much damage as possible to these more strategic targets before I go down. That was kind of the goal here. So, but anyways, going back to the Rus, the HE salvos or the HE on the ship is quite good. Just like that of the Champagne, you have a 49% fire chance. I mean, again, the shells are identical. That is one thing I want to stress. From armor piercing to HE, it shoots the same exact shell. You're going to get the same exact performance. But because you have an extra turret of 3, you're actually going to have more damage per salvos. And you're going to also lead to more fires per minute. Just because you have that extra turret of 3, right? So here we are in our final game with the Rus, which again was probably the best game I had within the first day that I got this ship. And I played the ship like 10 games in a row. I had very, very similar games. Like both these games, very similar. Able to do similar damages, similar rolls were shown, similar pros, similar cons. I just want to make sure that I highlighted also the better of the games, so you can kind of see where this ship can go as it can keep elevating its game per game to game, right? Stance. So I touched on the AP, I touched on the HE, I've already touched on the secondaries. The DPM's not terrible, but again, the platform, the 32 millimeters of armor, really not worth it. And there's just flat out better secondary ships. Like, why would I spec secondaries in the Rus when I know I'm going to be running into Los Andes, Valparazos, Navarans, like those kind of things? It just doesn't make any sense, right? Anti-aircraft. Anti-aircraft isn't terrible. Especially its medium and short range damage per minute. It's really not bad. But again, I think you're going to get better AA performance out of your Alsace. It's just what you're going to have to deal with. Again, you don't really want to be by yourself too much. And you need to understand your positioning too, depending on where the CV is at and positioning to yourself. So. And then obviously I already touched base on the consumables, and just so we're clear, this is the same exact reload booster that you have on the Champagne. The only difference is that your action time will last 20 seconds on the Rus, not 15 seconds like it does on the Champagne. So what's this going to translate to? Well, because you already have a longer main battery reload time on the Rus, it's going to allow you to get basically 2 salvos off in the span of 1 reload time is what this is going to allow you to do, and which is why we have it, so we can take advantage of opportunities like this with the Mayoko, and we can take full advantage of that, right, with our guns. And again, these are what you're looking for. You want to make sure you find people who are unaware, and you can take full advantage of that. And basically in one salvo, we have essentially, almost, not quite though, eliminated the Mayoko from the game, as he is essentially lower than half HP, so it allows our other ships to have a chance at killing him as well. And then we go ahead and follow that up with another salvo on the Synop here, who is flat broadside on, not knowing that I was here, I guess. I don't know. And we still schwack him for about 18,000 damage too. Now that we've talked about the ship, about what this ship is, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the how to play this ship. Because some of us I've seen, there's been a lot of bad Rus players I've seen out there. So I want to try to help you guys with how you want to play this ship. I think a really a sweet spot with this ship is anywhere between 18 to 15 kilometers away from vessels, as that is enough range that you don't look as too intriguing of a target, but you're not in the way back where you're not even potentially sharing your HP with ships. Also at that range, I find with my shell velocity, where my guns can cover, my reload speed, all that stuff, I'm really taking advantage of doing a lot of damage, and I'm being a little bit more consistent with my shells landing on target. I mean, yes, this is typical French ships. You're going to have those inconsistent volleys from time and time again. But at the end of the day, I still think with what damage you're pumping down range with your main battery reload booster, you're still going to be doing a fair amount of damage and taking full advantage of those broadsides, which is what you want to be looking for. So then it takes me to another important step. So we've already taken into account positioning with distance. Well, how about on the map itself? Where do I want to position myself? Now, a lot of hardcore, really competitive players are going to say you want to play more midline, right? Which is like kind of like the Vermont, a prime example. You want to play more midline so that let the broadsides come to you. And by means, if you spawn in the middle, stay in the middle. I think it's a great tactic, a great positioning strategy, 100%. If you happen to spawn on the flank, I would go as far out on the 1 or 10 line as possible, so that you have your guns always facing inside towards the right or towards the left. You never have to change an alter. All you have to do is go forward and backwards, and you're able to take advantage of that, because at some point in time, they're either going to have to angle towards you, or they're going to have to angle towards the ships more in the middle of the map. So I found myself taking advantage of that, and actually I found myself dishing out a lot of citadels towards the enemy. Again, though, the big caveat here is you don't want to push up too far forward, because then you become shark bait and you basically get left out to dry, and you will get whittled down very, very quickly. So you have to be careful of that. Some ships you want to be careful for, obviously, your HE kiting spammers. Ships that jump out to me are like your Zhao, your Goliath, your Henry, just to name a couple, right? Obviously, your Conqueror, your Thunderer, any ship that's notorious for just spamming HE, you have to know if they're on your flank or not, because then this kind of throws a damper in things with this kind of play style that I'm showcasing right here, which is the forward, backward. You're not really changing, altering course left or right. You're more just up and back, maintaining that, 15 to 18 kilometer distance from ships, okay? Obviously, you have to know where submarines are, because if you're nose in like this, homing torpedoes or just straight launch torpedoes, it's going to be easy to land those on your nose there and doing catastrophic damage to you. And that'll send you back to port very, very quickly. And the last thing probably would be obviously those pesky little destroyers. Make sure you know where they're at, because if they have inside position on you, it's a lot easier to land those torpedo volleys at your ship, as you're really not altering your course with your WASD keys too much. But then again, my guns are always pointing in towards the middle of the map, which allows me to take advantage of ships that are not necessarily paying much mind to me. Like, I'm sure that GQ Johnny, he already knew he was going to die, but he probably thought he was going to die more from the destroyer that was spotting him, or the submarine that was spotting him on my team, rather than the battleship on the 2 line here on this map, right? And again, hopefully I'm not giving too bad of advice. Like, I mean, I understand that a lot of players would probably hate this, but again, if you're fighting, you're making impact, you're shooting strategic targets, I don't really think your teammates are going to have a problem with your positioning and or playing. But one thing that this ship really can't do, I've already touched base on this a little bit earlier on in the video, is it really can't tank. The 32 millimeters of armor on this ship, you will just melt so incredibly fast. Positioning is probably the #1 issue with the Rouss. You have to position your ship well, or you're going to die really quickly, or you're not going to have any targets to shoot that are reliable. Because if you're like this and enemy battleships are just staying nose in on you, it's really going to be a struggle bus for you to play the game and be effective at the same time. Okay, so I'm really hopefully trying to avoid you finding yourself in those scenarios. Okay. What else to talk about with the Rouss that I really like? I think the big glaring issue that a lot of people have with this ship is the inconsistency of, from salvo to salvo, okay? And I have experienced that, okay? I would be lying to you if I told you that doesn't exist on this ship. It does, okay? But how I've already mentioned to you how it is, a problem with more of the community, not really understanding what they're asking for and what they think is balanced or what's not balanced, I think is more of the issue here, okay? This ship, like you saw last game with the Bremen, the opening salvo on the Bremen, this ship has the capability to absolutely send ships back to port so quickly. But the thing that makes it balanced is that it has to survive that its inconsistencies of its main battery from salvo to salvo, and it can supplement that with its main battery reload booster. I think is the big thing here that we're looking for. If you want to take, I already flashed up the commander build earlier on in the video. I'll probably go ahead and do that later on. Maybe I did this already before the battle. Things that are going to allow you to have a faster consumable cooldown. Things that are going to allow you to, make sure you stay in the battle longer. Typical, your standard typical, damage control build, so that you're staying in the fight as long as possible. Your damage mitigation wise, taking advantage with your consumables, I think is the big thing. Maybe get a quicker heal cooldown, maybe your main battery reload booster getting up quicker, maybe taking the damage control module in slot 1 instead of main armaments. These are all things you can theoretically ask yourself. If you're finding trouble with one certain area of the Rouss, go ahead and compensate for it. There are definitely answers to all of this, but the big one that you really don't have an answer to is your teammates. This ship does require one thing, and it's spotting. If you don't have spotting, sniping battleships, especially sniping battleships, are a pain to play, because you simply do not have the targets to be shooting at, right? And then you're sitting there doing nothing towards the further ends of the map, and it's just not a fun experience. And I think that's where the problem comes from, okay? This isn't Slava, okay? I want to create that, that's crystal clear. This is not Slava. This is a little bit similar, but ultimately different, because you still maintain a lot of the French problems. One massive French problem is your main battery guns will get knocked out fast, okay? There's an example. Here's some hot, steamy Rouss-on-Rouss action here. Triple fire, by the way. So I told you, the HE is not bad, so definitely use that at times. But your main battery guns will get knocked out. The infamous John Bart syndrome, I like to call it. The John Bart. I mean, how many times have we seen John Bart's? Both their turrets have been destroyed, in earlier on replays or previous replays or earlier iterations on this game. I've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen it. And you're gonna have the same issue here. If you find yourself nose on, especially if you're in a cruiser too, shoot the turrets. Okay, like Des Moines, Buffaloes, heavy armor piercing salvos. Aim right for those turrets because it's gonna knock them out a lot. You'll find yourself knocking out the Rus turrets an absolute metric fuck ton because it's that typical French problem that arises, which is their turrets are not really that armored. They're kind of more flatter, so they don't have a high chance of ricocheting or shatters. It sucks, okay? It does suck. But again, furthering to tell you that this ship does not want to be in close. It wants to be at range. The only reason we pushed in like this a little bit is because we wanted to make sure that we killed this enemy Rus, because there was a big problem was not allowing our Buffalo to move, even though he may be AFK here. I'm not 100% sure what he's doing. He didn't help me once. Thank God I had destroyers though, because I 100% believe with my turrets getting knocked out and that guy coming in with a full head of steam, he probably would have rammed me and killed me, okay? So I really have to tip my hat off to my allied destroyer players here. Now, obviously we have a Sin Yong lurking around the islands here. We know his torpedo threat is insane, so we have to tread with caution here, and hopefully our destroyer players can go ahead and screen for those deep water torpedoes, and hopefully I can hit him with a single salvo and finish him here. The problem is that the Sin Yong, unlike a lot of, well, most like similar light cruisers in this game, if they're flat broadside to you, especially at this range, my shells are going to go screaming right through his ship and just do nothing but overpens. So I'm going to have to wait until he kind of slightly angles to me to slightly increase the armor threshold to allow my shells to go ahead and fuse. I believe I need around, 68 millimeters of effective armor to go ahead and, as a threshold, to go ahead and fuse my armor piercing. That, coupled with my penetration and my shell velocity, it's hard to find sometimes. That's why the ranges I gave you is probably where you want to play the ship. If you're playing in close, like I am right now, which is, again, way out of my element, you're probably going to be overpenning the vast majority of the cruisers you face, okay? So don't be surprised if you do that. And then you're going to be like, oh, no, this ship sucks, blah, blah, blah. Well, Waffle told you, just like a lot of other French ships, your velocity is so great that when you get in close like this, it really is a disaster. And look at him. He knows. Flat broadside. There it is. We still do a lot of damage, but let's be honest here. We all should have thought there should have been a dev strike 100%. Yes. Not going to happen, though, because of his lightly armored ship. Again, Buffalo, AFK, probably would have been dead already, but because our Buffalo is disconnected, probably has AT&T Wi-Fi like I do, he disconnects from time to time again, and there you go. Kind of sucks. He gets away with murder. But again, if you look at the score on the top part of your screen, this game is a win. Unless our team throws themselves away and staying stationary, I really don't see us losing this battle. So, but yeah, guys, my final thoughts about the Rus, guys. I cannot tell you how much I love this ship, and for only 6,000 doubloons that it cost me to pick up this vessel, I am more than satisfied with her. I think she's super fun. I'm going to be playing this ship a lot. She does punish broadside, and she's a very interactive play style. Where the Champagne, it has a faster reload, but only 6 shells going down range with this kind of shell velocity and shell performance. It can be frustrating at times, but again, you supplement it now with a third turret, which is awesome. And again, I love the Alsace hull. I'm not going to sit here and scream it's tanky. It just looks aesthetically pleasing. And if I angle right against enemy armor piercing, I can go ahead and ricochet a decent amount of shells. Okay, so but all in all, guys, I love the package here, and hopefully if you are lucky enough to go ahead and pick her up, you have a lot of fun in her as well. Anyways, guys, thank you for tuning in and watching this in-depth little review of the Rus. Now go out there and raise hell and get better results in your Roussillon. Have a good day, guys, and peace out.